You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt McGackie, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers.
What is up, good people? Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for coming to this one. This one is a little different. Usually I talk to guitar people who obviously, because who isn't, have an interest in pizza. Today, I'm talking to somebody who's primarily known for his passion and knowledge about pizza. But guess what? He's a musician as well. He went to school for recording. He's an all-around great dude. Today, I'm talking to Scott Wiener from Scott's Pizza Tours. Yes, this man literally makes a living giving tours of the best pizza places in New York City. But he also loves guitar, so it was this great combination of interests that just collided in this one conversation. We spend a lot of time dissecting creativity and the different expressions of it, especially when it comes to DAW or effects pedals. No matter what that happens to be, there's a lot of crossover with these endeavors. So this was a really fun episode. It's not one I expected to do in the early days of the podcast, but make all the sense in the world all these years later, now that I've been talking about pizza so often. So if you're not familiar with him, give him a follow on the socials. If you plan on visiting NYC anytime soon, you're definitely going to want to take one of his tours. I know that I'm going to the next time I'm back in the city. So look him up if you've never heard of him. He is a very well-regarded person in the pizza world, to say the very least. So I hope you enjoy this conversation, and let's get right to it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have Scott Wiener from Scott's Pizza Tours. Now, longtime listeners of the show will not be confused at all as to why I would be talking to this man. If this is your first time listening, you're like, I thought this was a guitar show. Here's the thing. It's a guitar. It pretends to be a guitar show, but it's really just my excuse to talk to people that I think are cool. And I'm obsessed with pizza. And Scott happens to be a guitarist and musician as well. I don't know if most people know that. So it all kind of just slots together nicely. And here we are today in our separate places. And I think we're going to have a great chat. Dude, so I think the first place to start, and one of the main reasons I wanted to get you on, is because you and I have this similar, I don't want to say similar path, but it's there's a lot of similar things between what we do now. But you've taken it and put it on like super steroids. So I'm obsessed with like pedals and gear and nerding out on all aspects of that. And you are obsessed with pizza. Clearly, you can identify pizza. You can identify the things that I know about pizza. Largely, I've taken from the content that you've put out and a few others. But we've both found a way to make these weird obsessions into a livelihood somehow. And so that's what I think the main thing I wanted to talk about on top of our obvious shared interests here today. But let's start from the top. Let's tell my listeners may not be as familiar with you as I am. Maybe we start with when did you start like becoming obsessed with pizza? How did that happen?
I think around the same time you probably did, like around the same time anyone on earth did, which is the earliest you can remember being at a birthday party or a pizza party at school. It's like I don't have an early memory, but I know that whenever it was that I was first exposed to pizza, I think I got it right away that this was something that it's like a forever food,
Mm-hmm.
But
absolutely.
But when that transition from being just a normal person into pizza, into being like, oh, this is going to be my whole life, that didn't happen until right around like college. And it's too generous of an introduction for you to call me a guitarist, because I'm more of I will play any instrument if it means that I'm going to get to travel and tour and go on an adventure. And so in college,
I love it.
Yeah, I was like the drummer or guitarist or whatever. You needed somebody on tour, and I was there. So I would tour with bands from Central New York, where I went to college, and every time we went out on tour, we'd stop at pizzerias because that's cheap food.
Of course.
Yeah. And that's where I first learned about Frank Pepe's. I know your listeners can't see it, but you're wearing a Frank Pepe shirt right now.
I am. Shout out Eric Rossier, a longtime supporter of the show. He sent me this as a gift one year, and it's one of my favorite shirts.
It's awesome.
And reminders that I need to get to Frank Pepe's.
You'll get there.
I've been there.
It's on the other side of the country. But when I first started going to places like Pepe's and Sally's and all these other spots, it was part of the adventure of being on tour. And I think that's when the switch flipped, because I realized that people have such allegiance to Frank Pepe's or to Lou Malnati's in Chicago, or I don't know, name your emos in St. Louis. And I just thought that was so cool that people have this allegiance to their local pizzeria. And then when I got back home to New Jersey, where I'm from, I was like, well, the adventure continues. I got to go to all these famous pizzerias in New York. I got to spend some time doing all this cool stuff and visiting pizzerias. And then one thing led to another, and I started doing pizza tours in 2008, all based on the fact, because I was touring with the band, and then when that band fell apart, I was like, well, I really like the touring, adventuring kind of thing. How do I pull that into this whole pizza obsession? And that's when I started doing tours in 2008.
Right. So yeah, it was a little bit later for me, like discovering the nuances of pizza. I think a lot of people's attitude, and this isn't necessarily wrong, is that like all pizza is good pizza, and there's just varying degrees of that. And I can make an argument for that, except for this one place that no longer exists here in Portland. That was a pretty bad pizza place. But I feel like for me, it was the opening of a local pizzeria called Mi Familia, and it's a wood-fired pizza place here in my hometown. And when that opened, it was like 15, 16 years ago. That was when I realized, I was like, wait a minute, there's levels to this game and different techniques. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that like I've fallen in love with like almost every regional style that I've tried, but it's like, oh, there's people who take it very seriously and people who kind of slap it together out of whatever they have on hand. And I think you can tell a difference in the end product there. And that kind of started my whole obsession. And that was also around the turning point when Portland, where I'm from, started getting more like really serious pizza makers. I think I feel like that's about the time it started happening. And so it's been kind of a weird journey to like take this very specific food and and become the mini version of yourself in my neck of the woods. Like, where do I go? Take me to I'm like, well, I don't know it like you do, but I definitely have.
Yeah, but it's funny because you and I both had the same experience where you responded to something being so much better than what you'd had before, or just so different. And it's like, it's like with music, once you hear somebody, it's like, whoa, that person's approaching this. It's the same tools, but they're approaching this in a completely different way. And it means something more to me. Same thing with the pizza. And like Portland is a great place for pizza because people are experimenting way more than they do by and large in New York City. More experimentation in Portland.
Right. Yeah. And it seems like we've had an influx of people that have, they take these regional styles and it's like, okay, we do, say Chicago style thin crust, which a lot of people, including myself, didn't even realize it was a thing till Jerry from
I was going to say, Jerry Benedetto, you probably know Jerry.
Yeah. We've talked a few times. I've consumed his pizzas as frequently as I possibly can due to the limited nature. Those are some of my favorites. I absolutely love what that guy's doing. It's incredible.
I still haven't been.
Do you know him?
I know him from afar, but we've talked, but I've never been.
I will say this: he's one of those people where the aesthetics of the pizza are so on point, you're like, I wonder if it's going to live up to and it does. You get there, you grab a square, and it's like, whoa. I haven't talked to anybody yet that has had it and not been really impressed with what he does. And the fact he started in his kitchen during the pandemic it's a great story. So hopefully I can get him on one of these days to tell it. But yeah, it's been wild. So it's interesting too. I feel like you came along at just the right time to where people would have been open to the idea of a pizza tour, because I think that seems kind of like a weird thing to a lot of people. How was, like, when you opened your quote unquote doors, what was that experience like? Were people just kind of flooding in immediately? Did you have to really pull and scrape it first? What happened?
I was coming from a background having nothing to do with restaurants, food, tourism, any of that. And the business that I'm in is essentially a tourism business. So I had no idea what I was doing. And I didn't know anything about tours. I had never really been on a tour, like any tour. I knew what they were, but when I started, or when I was getting ready to start, is when I went on my first tours. I was like, oh, I get my first tour in 3 weeks. I better go on some to figure it out. So I didn't know what was going on. And the floodgates did not open, not at all. But there was some press early on, which from my days in being in a band and touring and having to do our own press and, get people out to shows when they didn't know anything about the band. I knew how to send out press releases, and I did that. And so somebody showed up from the New York Daily News on the first tour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was terrified because I was like, no, you're not coming, because what if it sucks? And
right, I'm still figuring this out.
Yeah, well, I really almost said no. And I was like, well, gee, I can't have that attitude going through the whole thing, because if my attitude is always the fear, like, well, I don't want you to see a bad tour, then like, that's my one shot. Well, he's probably not going to call the next week. So
probably not. You're right.
Yeah. So it just said, oh, come on in. And then the first couple of weeks people signed up, but then, it dropped off a little bit, because you're right. It is a weird thing. And I was brand new at it. I had no track record. I'm 0% Italian, not born and raised in New York City, not like a big flower covered, stereotypical mustachioed guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was a bit of a struggle. But
yeah,
I just kind of put my head down and learned all I could. Like everything you're talking about with understanding like what Jerry's doing with Midwestern Tavern Style, or any of the places that are going on doing great pizza. You just have to know what it is they're doing or how they're doing what they're doing. And then it makes the whole thing way more interesting.
Did you just kind of absorb the end product and try to figure it out from there? Did you start talking to these owners of these places and trying to dissect it? How did you learn the things that you learned? Because you can't it's hard for me to imagine just starting to take people on a tour and just being able to bite into it and tell what's going on the way you can. Well, you have way more knowledge than that.
Well, it starts with curiosity. So the way that you've learned anything you've learned about, like, I don't know, what different types of wood do to the resonance of a guitar or something like that. You have to first have the question, right? There has to be something in your brain that says, hey, there's probably a difference between these different woods. You should find out what that is and why it is. And it's that interest that I started asking pizzerias those questions. And because they're not covered in books. It's not like a pizza book or a pizza history book ever really tells you the depth. So I just asked a lot of questions. And the more questions I asked, the better my questions became, which meant the more questions I'd ask. And it's a cycle that continues to this day, Blake. I was at dinner last night with a guy who imports flour and tomatoes from Italy. And I'm asking a million questions because this stuff, there's always more to learn. Mm-hmm. So it's just constant.
Right. Yeah, it's not unlike music where there's almost unlimited possibilities with it. You do kind of construct things in certain constraints, of course. There's, generally flour and, sauce. But like outside of that, it really balloons and it can be almost anything that you want it to be. Much the same as a song can be once you approach it from that mindset.
It's a great metaphor for it, because I think people get frustrated because they're like, oh, pizza, what is it? It's dough, sauce, and cheese, right? But that's like saying that's like saying, oh, what's the sound of, I don't know. I'm just looking at your wall of guitars. I'm thinking about guitars. I'm like, well, what's that guitar and that guitar? They're just different shapes. But then you talk to somebody who cares about guitars, and it's like, what are you even talking about right now? You know, because in the way that the sound of a guitarist is not just a guitar through effects through an amp. It's also, what are the strings on that guitar? What pickups are in that guitar? What's the wiring like? It's every little step along the way matters. In the same way that a pizza maker will say, it's not dough, sauce, and cheese. It's flour, salt, water, and yeast, and the nuances of each of those. It's tomato and how you crush it and how much salt you add, and it's like all the details. That's where everything is.
Right. I mean, and then, outside of like all of the ingredients and the way you order effects or toppings or whatever, then you have the actual pizza maker who's designed the whole system around the kitchen. If you take Jerry and put him into the kitchen at Joe's, at Carmine Street with free reign, is it going to come out the same as what Joe's does? Maybe close, but like probably not exactly the same.
Yeah.
Much the same way as when I fret a note, I don't sound the same as, Kirk Hammett from Metallica. Even if I played the same note, it's not going to be exactly the same because of the little nuances in our fingers and the amount of pressure and whatever else. He may take the same recipe and it's like, oh, but he tossed it this way instead of that way. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, that gives a slightly different texture that people can pick up on if you're really paying attention.
Well, that's what I really like about subcultures, whether it's a guitar subculture or pizza subculture, it doesn't matter, is that somebody outside of that subculture sees the painting from a distance and it looks sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're in the subculture, you're really close to the painting. And that's when you see the strokes of the brush. And you think, oh, the strokes of the brush are the cool part. And the person who's not in that subculture, they don't even know that you can step closer. And then once they do, it might be too much. Their mind might explode.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really interesting because I'm sure, like you were talking to somebody who primarily imports flour and tomatoes, right? Most people don't even realize that's a job. Same in the way I am, involved with so many different effects manufacturers, and people will ask me sometimes, well, what do you do? And it's like, well, I have the pod. I have to like adjust my answer depending on who I'm talking to and what I think, how long I want this conversation to be, because there's so many aspects to it. But if the word guitar pedal ever comes up, half the time they're like, what do you mean? What's a guitar pedal? I don't understand it. And then most people get like a wah-wah pedal, but that's all the extent that they think that it is these days. Yet there's hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people who will spend all of their time listening to shows like this, watching different pedal reviews, watching the JHS show on YouTube. And it's just all about this one part of the guitar signal that when then you bust it open and then there's a million other parts inside it that people will go down to like, well, that doesn't have the right diode, so it can't possibly be, X, Y, and Z. Some of that gets down to the point of diminishing returns, but you're absolutely right. The subcultures get tied up in the minutia sometimes, and I think it can go both ways. Sometimes it's wonderful to appreciate the brush strokes, but then we can lose sight of the painting at the same time and just be like, oh, we're so worried about whether this pepperoni's curled or not, we can't decide whether this is actually a good slice.
Yeah, right. Or understanding, well, why does pepperoni even curl? What is the thing that's happening? Why do we like it? Does it? Am I just liking it because it looks good on an Instagram picture? Or is there something going on that I actually like about it? It's the same arguments happen in guitar effects that they do in cooking, because it's all about, but the minutia is where it gets fun.
Yes, it is.
But I totally agree with you that if you can't enjoy, like if I can't enjoy a crappy slice of pizza, then everything's lost.
Absolutely.
You gotta, like I'm not a snob at all. But I was talking to somebody, a friend of mine was over here before, and he was like, oh, like, can you go back to that pre-pizza tour life when you did just eat a slice and not think about it? And the answer is no, I can't.
No.
But then I guess the secondary question is like, is that a bad thing? Like, when you listen to music, are you always on it thinking about what's going on behind the scenes, or is part of you able to still listen to it as an emotional listener?
That's a very good question. I think it's been more difficult to listen to things emotionally, especially in the last few years. But I think like recording my own music, I had to get, the listeners have heard this story a million times, but I had to get out of my own way because so much of my time was spent like, here, let me show you what this distortion sounds like, and just kind of playing some random thing. And it was all about showing the single ingredient. It was all about showing what that pedal sounds like in this random context that I decided to assign to it. And I had to get out of my own way and realize like I'm so spoiled. I have all this rad gear. I have a place to record that most people don't have access to. And I can play pretty much whenever I want, however loud I want. And it's a very fortunate place to be. And yet I was still kind of distracted by the minutia and making sure that I was telling folks about it, which is, part of my job, and that's never going to go away. But I wasn't playing music for music's sake. I was just playing it for the gear's sake. And so in 2021, I threw that temporarily into the trash and was just like, I'm making a record, and I don't care what pedals I use. I don't care what style it is. I don't care how it comes out. I'm just going to make a record to make a record, and that's it. No other goals other than, does this sound like something I want it to sound like? And I was able to do that. And that helped get my brain back into, why did you even love this stuff in the first place? Like, why? Well, I didn't start becoming obsessed with pedals because I was obsessed with pedals. It was because I heard a sick riff or a super awesome song that I loved and fell in love with the music first. And I had to kind of rewire myself to get back to that. And last night was another good example. I went to a show that I wasn't sure I would ever get to see again. The Gaslight Anthem reunited and kicked off their tour, their U.S. tour here in Portland. And I'm friends with some of those guys. And so even then it was like, I know them, and I know, how their brains work to a small degree, or at least how they think about effects and music. And so I'm kind of thinking about that watching them perform, which is, I think, not something that most of the people in the audience could say. But at the same time, when they kick into a handful of my favorite songs, that is why I fell in love with their music in the first place. I mean, I was able to get in that mosh pit and just have a good time like everybody else. And I was not thinking about, I wonder what order Brian has his pedals in right now. I wonder, I was just like, nope, I'm back in, 2007 or whenever that song was first released, and I'm rocking out to it like I heard it for, the first time. And so I think music has that capability to rewire that in a very immediate sense, because I didn't actively choose to start thinking in that way. It just like, all right, now I'm back to this mode again, which is genuinely, I think, more enjoyable in a general sense, rather than constantly dissecting and being analytical about everything.
Hey, if you enjoy both those things, then all the better. There's nothing wrong with loving the tweaker side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it becomes a problem. But you don't have that problem because you have the shred shed. Not me. I have an apartment in Brooklyn where I can't play as loud as I want because my neighbor will do the broomstick thing to my seriously, like it's, but maybe that's why pizza became a better outlet for me, because I can do that silently. I can make pizza. That's
true.
And as you're talking about dissecting things, it's got me thinking about, when I make pizza, I'm usually trying to emulate what's going on in famous pizzerias, because that helps me teach it on tours. Absolutely. And on our classes that we do. But what you just said, like I said, oh, screw it, I'm just going to make a record. I'm like, wow, I've never just said, oh, I want to make the pizza that I want to make. Because that's not really why I make pizza. I make it to learn. But maybe I should give myself a couple months of just making it the way I want to make it.
Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm here to talk about the Maris Mercury X. My dad's always going on and on about how cool Maris is. He really went off on one about the Mercury X the other day. He said something about a 4800 hertz sample rate and 99 preset locations in 33 banks, and something along the lines of the most advanced reverb pedal ever devised by man? That's all true, but I only care about one thing. This pedal sounds sick. So make sure you check out the Mercury X and all the other fine products at Maris.us, as well as fine retailers worldwide. All right, Dad, now can I have my Pocky?
How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days, you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services. And it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there. Well, that leads me down to a question I was going to ask later, but with all these experiences, obviously you've made a lot of pizza. You know how to make a good pie in various styles. Have you ever thought, and I'm sure this question has been posed to you before, have you ever thought, I'm going to open my own spot sometime?
I never want to do that.
Okay.
Because I don't find joy in the repetition, in the mechanic. I find joy in the execution, but I get enough out of making 6-7 pizzas in a row. That's enough. I don't want to make, because also I would be afraid that that's turning the food into the product. And on our tours, the food is not the product. It's the education. And you can't sell education in a restaurant, because then everyone's like, we get it. You're locally sourced. You're 58-hour fermentation. We get it. Just give me the freaking pizza. I'm hungry. I don't find any joy in that myself. I would rather celebrate other people who are out there doing it.
Well, and that's wonderful. I love, this has been a reoccurring theme on the last few episodes, and really the whole podcast, but especially the last few episodes. I think it's really important for people to realize what it is that makes themselves happy on a day-to-day basis, or what they enjoy about certain processes or things that they do on a regular basis. Because so much of our time is spent doing just, especially, if you're not self-employed or you're doing like a 9-to-5 type operation, there are so many pieces of our day that are consumed by things that are kind of like, I don't care about this. But we all have things that we enjoy. And I think recognizing what those are and recognizing why you enjoy those things will help you to spend more time doing them and therefore enjoying life a little bit more. So the fact that you're like, clearly, I think because it's a pretty obvious connection to most people. Well, a lot of people were like, why don't you start a guitar store if you're so obsessed with guitar? And I was like, I appreciate those that do start cool guitar stores because I love going to them. But similarly, I would not find any joy in running a guitar store. I like to go to there and rifle through the bins and see what's there, but I wouldn't want to be the one putting the bins together and the displays, and that's just not what makes me tick. And I think the restaurant is something that seems obvious to the outsider, like, well, you know so much about pizza, you should start a pizza place. But you've recognized very, very quickly, it seems like, nah, that isn't it for me.
It's the same idea as like, not every football fan wants to be a linebacker. Mm-hmm. The joy, you got to understand the joy, where you're getting the joy and what it does. And also the fact that like doing these tours and what we do with Slice Out Hunger and all that, it's plenty to deal with. I don't feel like it's any higher level to run a pizzeria or to run a guitar store or whatever, because then at that point it turns into, like I worked at a recording studio, and I thought, oh, owning a recording studio, this guy who owns it must be like really creative and passionate and all that. And then one day he said to me, he said, music has nothing to do with the recording studio business. It's basically like running a hotel. The job of his job as the owner was to make sure the rooms were ready and clean, and that the gear was in working order, and that the coffee was fresh. And it had nothing to do with creativity on his side, besides like buying the good gear. But he's like, it's just like it's running a hotel. You're just renting out a room.
Wow. I never thought of it that way.
And it makes sense. It's sad, but it's true.
It is true. It is true. I mean, unless you are the owner and also the one getting your hands on the knobs and, doing the engineering sessions. But even then, you're limited to what time you have, because you have to run the hotel aspect for for a better, lack of a better term. You have to do that as the owner of the studio. And if you want to do the engineering side, which is, I imagine why most studio owners get into it in the first place, you still have limited time to do that. And you probably need people to be in the studio recording more often than you could be there engineering everything. So you only get one small piece of that. Unless you love the hotel aspect. Some people may love the hotel aspect.
Well, it's the same thing with running pizza tours, or what anybody who's listening to this probably has to deal with is, like, running the tours is only a part of what it is to run the business. There's so much admin and training and making sure your equipment is great or that your stuff's in the right place. Like today, I'm going to spend most of the day today doing prep work. I'm not doing a tour today, but it's prep work that helps tours happen. And that's the work. So in a sense, even running a pizza tour business is kind of like running a hotel, because
a little bit.
Well, the customer service that you get doing what we do is like, I booked my tour on the wrong day. Can you reschedule me? It's the logistics of getting to the tour. The tour itself is the least work of the whole thing.
Right. Well, and that's something I say over and over again. My favorite part of what I do is this part right here. But getting people to listen to this and getting people to be, to see the value in taking the time to come on, and, the scheduling and the blah and the paperwork and the blah, 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 that all is just comes with the territory. I'm not even trying to complain about it. It's what it is. It comes with running a business. You're never going to spend all of your time doing the part that you really enjoy. My main point with trying to emphasize that is, like, just try to spend as much time doing that as you can. You're going to have a bunch of nonsense that you have to do along with it that isn't necessarily fun for anybody. I don't think there's a ton of people out there whose favorite thing is rescheduling misscheduled pizza tours.
What's your least favorite part of what you do?
It varies. Obviously, like books and taxes.
Yeah.
I hate that part. I hate it so much. But it's completely necessary, because there are very simple things. It can be very complicated too, but there are very simple things that if you're not aware of when running a small business, that just cost you for no reason other than you just weren't aware, and it's like, wow, if I had known that, I wouldn't be spending thousands of dollars right now, but here I am basically burning money that I would rather put back into the business or myself. So that aspect of it I kind of hate, but there's no getting around it in this country or any other country. There's the tax man's always there. You always got to work with them and try to figure all that crap out, which is never fun, I don't think. But unless you're the tax man, then it's pretty fun, I guess. But that one's pretty obvious for anybody. But the one that's kind of eating at me lately is just the need for constant input on the internet's need for constant input of content. And I don't mean the show. I mean all the things I do to try to grab people's attention for half a second so that they can maybe find their way to the show eventually.
Yeah, like the social media stuff. The
social media stuff is become, it's the whole reason I have a job. So I'm not trying to, complain about it too much, but I'm getting to that point where, like, it's going to be break time here pretty soon, just because I'm getting burned out. And I know that if I take a break, when I come back to it, I'll be refreshed and have better ideas and, and all that. So right now that's kind of weighing on me. I'm like, I'm kind of tired of posting random, not random. I always try to put thoughts into it, but like, I'm tired of constantly thinking about what I need to post on social in order to get people over to this show, which ultimately is what pays the bills and what I like to do. So
yeah, well, because isn't it cool that at the end of the day you get to spend your time talking about gear and guitar stuff and whatever pizza stuff every once in a while? Like, that's pretty cool. Like, I can never really complain because I spend every day talking about pizza.
Exactly, absolutely.
But it's all relative. There's always stuff that you don't love doing, but that small price to pay. If I got to spend a day and a half doing bookkeeping every month, I'll take that.
Sure.
Over having a real job.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. I hope that didn't come across as too complainy, because this is I'm like feel truly, truly blessed to be able to do this, and it's a very odd thing, and it's a very niche thing, and not very many people do get to do it. So I'm not trying to complain, but sometimes it is like sometimes. Well, for instance, sometimes I'm not doing music stuff in my downtime. It'll be completely unrelated. That's where pizza comes in often.
Yeah,
actually.
I want to hear about your because pizza is clearly a part of your life. So clearly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And my first time in New York really was extremely eye-opening, because at that point I was like, yeah, it looks really good, but it still kind of looks like pizza. Like, how different can it really be? Yada yada. I was kind of skeptical, even though I had lots of friends tell me otherwise, and people that I trusted their taste buds. I still was like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like you're maybe going too far with this.
When was your first trip to New York?
2000, probably 2015. I'm guessing.
And where did you have
2016.
pizza?
The first place I had was Joe's on Carmine Street.
And how'd you feel about it?
I was like, you've been an idiot. Like, I was still even up to like holding it in my hand. I was like, still looks like pizza. And I folded it up. I took a bite. I was like, oh, I see.
What was so different about
it? I think the first thing was the immediate crunch. Like that crunch followed by the kind of very perfect softness to the crust. And it had just the right amount of grease on it. That was one of my first experiences where it took me a while to figure out that. I always thought, if pepperoni pizza, that's what you go with everywhere. That's how you test. And then I realized, no, it's the cheese slice that you test with. That's because I actually like their cheese slice slightly better than their pepperoni slice there.
Absolutely.
It's the cheese slice. And so now that is my go-to test for anywhere I go is the cheese slice. I go there first and be like, can they do this well? And I analyze what I do and do not like about it. But yeah, it was Joe's. And then from there, yeah, we hit several places in New York City, and by no means all of them. But we've been twice, and it's just not even close to enough.
What were the highlights pizza-wise? And what were the lowlights? Yeah, what disappointed you?
Nothing disappointed me, honestly. Like, I wish I could remember the name of the small place that was just right next to our hotel. We were staying just off Broadway somewhere, and there was a small walk-up slice window that I have a picture of the sign somewhere in my phone, but I can't remember it.
Remember what hotel it was or what street it was?
Oh my, this is challenging my rather feeble brain. I can't remember exactly, but even that was just solid. I was like, this is my favorite slice that I've had, but it's very good, and it's right here. So
I think that's what people forget about New York, is that it's not like you can't make great pizza elsewhere. You live in Portland. You can make great pizza in Portland. People do it. But in New York, it's about the cultural aspect of pizza and how we treat pizza in New York.
Yes.
It's everywhere. The one that's close to you is usually pretty decent. A lot of the pizzerias in New York City are not destination worthy. Like the places in Midtown, you're not going to go out of your way for it.
Right.
But downtown in Brooklyn and the Bronx, you get some destination places. But the beauty in New York is not just about those 20 or 30 really amazing destination places. It's about the place that's on every corner is usually decent enough, especially if you've been out of New York for a while.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's the thing, is like, to get a slice that is in that ballpark for me, I have to drive probably 15 minutes, which isn't bad. You know, that's not like forever, but it's also not right next door, you know? So
what
there's something to that.
What about for pizza by the slice? Let's just talk about by the slice.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like in Portland?
Scotty's.
Yeah, love it.
Yep, Scotty's definitely. That's probably my favorite. Scotty's and Pizza Jerk are probably my favorite by the slice places. Well,
have you met Scotty? Do you know Scotty?
No, I've just seen him back there doing his thing. You've
got to talk. He's a guitar player.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh man,
he's a guitar player. And ask him if you can hear his high school pop punk band.
Okay, I'll shoot him a message.
I know you will love it. We spent the drive.
Phenomenal.
We drove to Atlantic City for a pizza show together once. We've been friends for years, and we spent the whole drive listening to each other's bands from like 20 years ago.
Yes,
and it was amazing. So Scotty Rivera is one of the most. He's so wonderful. I love him, and
yes,
talk to him.
That was a fun experience too. Because this was several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, is when it's kind of when Brian Fallon from Gaslight and I became a lot closer. He was in town. He wanted to go check out the Benson amp shop, and we got done doing that. And I'm like, "You need lunch?" He's like, "Yeah. What do you want?" I was like, "You want pizza?" He's like, "You sure? You sure about the Portland pizza shop?" I was like, "Let's go to Scotty's." Yeah. And we went to Scotty. He was like, "Wow, this is legit. Like, this is really, really good." And then he felt it was good enough that he had to announce that on stage that night. They're like, "You know what? You guys actually have really good pizza here." You know?
He said that?
It was, yeah. He's from New Jersey too. So that's a fairly strong endorsement in my book. That was fun.
Scotty's Pizza Jerk, totally great spot. What about your other non by the slice places? What else are you really loving lately in Portland?
Demos. Demos a pizza.
I haven't been. I don't know it.
Oh,
I'm writing it down.
You got to go to Demos. Demos is a New Haven style pizza, and oh my, I don't know how, like, on every pizza that they do, but the pizza, the cheese sauce combo, the crust is incredible. The crust is absolutely, like, from what I can gather and what my limited research has told me, it's very accurate to a New Haven style slice. There's like a multi-step baking process they go through to try to recreate some of it. And but the cheese and the sauce combo, it's such a perfect balance. Like, every time I bite into one of their pies, I'm like, what? How is this flavor explosion happening in my mouth? It's such good flavor. Demos is definitely.
I'm looking it up
definitely
right now.
in my spot.
Yeah, Demos, DEMO or DIMO?
DIMO. Yeah, Demos a pizza. It's
Abits.
so good.
Demos Abits.
Yep. Abits.
Which is funny because at a place that's doing New Haven style, you would say Abits, but then if you go to Abits Shoals, he actually wants you to say it a Pizza Shoals.
Yes, which throws us all off over here because we're West Coast people, and we're like, wait, what? I don't know what to say anymore.
Yeah, it's like, is it a Beats? Is it a pizza? And Brian wants you to say a Pizza Shoals. Brian, you know Brian.
I don't know him. No.
Guitar player.
I know, what? Hey, there's a connection here.
And actually, this is something to explore with us, is that there is a real connection between pizza makers and musicians.
It seems to be, at least in Portland, like, restaurant owners in general and musicians, like, more generally. But is it specific to pizza and guitar? That's what I wonder.
That's a great question. I think that just so many musicians, at least like rock musicians, are guitar players. There's just more of them,
right.
Like, band, how many drummers does your band need? But how many guitar players? I don't know. How many? There's no limit.
Right.
One bass is fine.
Mhm.
Unless, what was that, Big Bottom? Where everyone's playing bass, Spinal Tap?
That's true. Yeah. That's a great, any Spinal Tap reference I'm here for.
Oh my God. Love it.
So good. But yeah, there's more though. There's Baby Doll Pizza is a good by the slice place.
Ooh, I don't think I've been a Baby Doll.
Baby Doll's great.
I'll do it.
Yeah. Let's see what else we got. One I haven't been to, but maybe you have, because it's definitely one of the spots here. Is Gracie's. It's up.
Never been, but I have their T-shirt and it's very soft.
Well, that's important. You got to be comfortable.
Gracie's a Beats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have still not, because every time I'm up in St. John's, it's usually the middle of the day, and I'm like just south of Portland, so it's actually a little bit of a hike to try to get there. And so I think they serve around dinner time, and so I'm just not usually there around dinner time. But I will make a point to do it.
Next time I'm in town, we're gonna go there because my brother lives in Portland, so I'm there probably twice a year.
Ah, yes.
And I need to go to Gracie's. Need to do it. And Jerry's.
You do.
I need Jerry's.
Jerry, we got to get the tavern open.
Yeah, he's working on it. He's working on it.
I know.
It's a lot. It's a whole lot.
It's more than I could probably imagine. Like, especially how specific he is with what he wants and needs.
And it's also tough. Like, we're going through this weird growing pains phase of the pizza world where we're in a golden age right now. Like, golden age is maybe the wrong phrase. I think it's a long-term golden age of like 10 years, but we're in a really amazing spot right now where, like, especially in the middle of the pandemic, all these people were making incredible pizza at home or in small pop-ups, low overhead. They weren't so much worried about profit. They were just making amazing pizza, and it wasn't in a restaurant, so pretty inexpensive. And then that dream is just dying right now because now some people are saying, oh, I'm going to step up and make it legit, open up a shop. But that brings with it a whole new batch of problems. Now the pizza that you used to... Yeah. Well, now the same pizza, you're charging the same $17 a pizza, and suddenly most of that money has to go to rent and electricity and all this stuff that you took for granted when you were doing it under the radar.
Right. Exactly. I mean, insurance, like there's so many things that go into what something actually costs. That's something that I'm constantly talking about with people. So I'm partners with Scott Marcourt, who is my partner in String Joy Guitar Strings. And so we're making stuff down there in Nashville, and the amount, I had no idea how granular we would have to get. It's crazy.
Wait, I didn't realize this. You have a guitar string company?
Yeah, I'm a minority partner in it, but yeah, we make strings down in Nashville, and it's a wild adventure to try to do that as a sustainable business. Yeah. But he's very, very good at pretty much every aspect of it. So that's I feel fortunate to be along for the ride.
That's wild. But yeah, as we said before, when you get close to something, you realize how much depth there is.
Exactly. Well, and then I, like most people, were like, strings are strings, right? And that's what I thought. The first time the reason we got hooked up is he hit me up to come on this podcast around episode 20. And I literally thought to myself, like, strings? We're going to talk about strings for an hour? How's that going to even be possible? Fast forward to now, I spend anywhere from 30 minutes to 3.5 hours on the phone with that guy every single day talking about strings, at least 5 days a week, talking about some aspect of the string making business, which is so much more complicated than I ever would have imagined. Yeah,
like I'm just thinking about it right now, and just different styles of strings, different packaging, combinations of gauges. Like it's kind of infinite. The little ball at the end of the string. Mm-hmm. How many twists you do? I don't know.
Yeah, no, you got it. That's a lot of it. And one of the big things that a lot of people don't think about, they're like, a 46 is a 46, right? They're both the same size. They're both made of the same material. They both are wire wrapped around wire. It's the same thing, right? It's like, well, no, but there's different ways to get to these various gauges, especially on like bass strings. Bass strings will have multiple wraps. So you might have 3 wraps on a really heavy gauge bass string or more, and the wires that you choose to get to that same overall diameter will affect how it feels and plays, and there's compromises in every direction. Bendability versus sustain versus output, blah, 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 blah. There's all these different things that go into making a string perform the way you think that it should, and it's just like how big the core is versus the wrap wire, how compressed the wrap wire is around that core, because you can do it looser or tighter, and
how
tight the winds are together.
I mean, I guess maybe he would know more about, but how do you even know what questions to ask?
It really started happening when you get your hands into it, right? You can ask some of these questions as an outside person, especially if you visit. Well, most brands that you see are white labeled. Not all of them, but most of them are made by an outside party. Now, that doesn't mean that all of them are the same. A lot of them are. That doesn't mean that all of them are the same, even if they come from the same place. What's an example?
What are 2 brands that come from the same place and are probably the same string?
Well, a better example would be 2 brands that come from the same place that are definitely not the same string. Would be Fender strings are made by D'Addario, or at least as far as I'm aware, the last manufacturer I was aware of was they were made by D'Addario there in New York. But if you look at the specs when you dissect a Fender string versus a D'Addario string, they're very, very different.
Because Fender wants different. It's a spec thing. Fender just doesn't want to manufacture.
They used to make their own. Fender used to have their own factory in Mexico, and they would do all their own stuff. And for some reason, no one's 100% sure why, they closed it down. But they had those people go to D'Addario. This is all through the grapevine stuff. So a little bit speculation here. They had those people go to D'Addario and be like, this is how we want our stuff to be made.
I got to look this up. I think I had people from the D'Addario family on a tour once.
That wouldn't shock me at all. They're New York based.
And I remember they told me,
very likely.
And I think they sent me a bunch of strings. I got to look this up.
Would make a lot of sense.
But anyway, that's fascinating. So both from the same manufacturer, but different.
Yeah. D'Addario has publicly said, actually, that 30% of their output goes to OEM. Now, that could mean guitar manufacturers who just have them on as factory strings, or I know they do white label as well. So there's also some of the smaller brands, especially, not necessarily, I shouldn't exclusively say that, but there are brands where all their strings, they come from different places. Right. And even ours in the very beginning were like that, because Scott it started as a custom shop. This has turned into a big commercial. Sorry, everybody.
It's interesting though. Yeah. It's interesting.
Yes. Scott started basically with he when he was a kid, he was buying different sets from different places and putting them together into a custom set that he liked, and then throwing all the rest of it in the garbage. And he was like, this can't be, I've got the set of strings I'm looking for, but this can't be the best way to do this. And so he started looking into how can I provide this service for other people without so much waste? And that led him to, finding different manufacturers who would make for him. And so, he might like the 46 from one place and this other gauge from this other place and blah, blah, blah. And so he did piece things together based upon what he was looking for. And then over time, one of the manufacturers that were our primary source, he would go there and visit the factory and be like, no, I want it done this way. And it basically became such a pain. The guy was kind of like, you know what? How about you just take these 2 machines and do it yourself?
Wow.
And that's when the learning really happened, when it was because immediately they bought those 2 machines from him, or we bought those 2 machines from him. I was there the day the guy flew out, showed us the basics of how to operate them. And within 2 hours, there was already things that he was like, oh, we're going to do that different. We're going to do that different. We're going to do that different. And that was just on the first day. So it's been quite a process. It's been really, really, really wild. So it's again, this is all just to show how granular some of this stuff can really get. We are brought to you today by Sweetwater, specifically the Gear Exchange. You may have heard about this. This is a place where you can go to buy and sell your used gear. Maybe you got a pedal over there that's just kind of collecting dust. Maybe there's something you've been eyeing from the Sweetwater catalog. Well, right now is a great time to turn that unused gear into something you're actually going to use. Even better, if you sell on the gear exchange, you can keep 100% of the sale as long as you choose a Sweetwater gift card as your payout method. That is not too shabby because, let's be honest, most of this buying and selling we do is just to fund new gear purchases, and that is a great way to reach a wide variety of customers and keep 100% in your pocket, or rather on your pedal board. So go check out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange and turn that unused gear into something that's actually going to help you write that next huge riff.
Hello there. I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Goodhertz. And it's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're hearing it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblinssaudio.com. I think you're going to like what you find.
But that's what's fun about it. I really feel like there's nothing out there that's exciting without getting granular. Like being a car person, you get into the little nitty gritty. Being a movie fan, a baseball fan. People. I'm not a sports guy, but people who are sports fans, they know the stats of the player and what's going on. And there are so many people out there. It's like it's not a subculture; it's a culture. So many people,
100%.
Yeah. But then you look at the same thing for guitar players or pizza lovers or whatever, and then it's weird. But we're not doing anything different from what the football fans are doing.
No, and I think that's the thing is we can be nerds about everything, right? Like literally everything. And I think it used to be reserved for like comic book nerds or science nerd. That term used to be kind of derogatory and used to talk about somebody who was just really passionate about one thing. And I think as especially with the rise of the internet, we've grown to realize that everyone's nerdy about something. Some people are nerdy about gardening. Some people are nerdy about pizza. Some people are nerdy about guitar pedals. It's just we all like to get to that granular level with something. And that passion is what makes it interesting, ultimately.
Do you think there's a point at which somebody approaching it from the outside gets so overwhelmed that they're sort of turned away? Or is there enough out there that somebody could be like, oh, I want to understand more about guitar pedals and get into it because of all the depth?
I think that it goes both ways. I think people could. I know for me, the first time I started like really thinking about trying to learn about guitar tone and trying to learn about because it was always like I can never make my guitar sound like what it sounds like on these records. It just doesn't. It's not working. And when I first started diving into that, I thought to myself, well, maybe this is more than my brain can handle because these people are taking it to a level that I just like absolutely do not understand. And then I realized really it comes down to, I think with everything that's hands-on like this, you got to just plug it in and try it. You just got to try it.
That's good advice.
And then you figure out what works for you and what doesn't. You just have to try the thing.
Do you remember what was that first guitar tone that you heard that you were trying to emulate?
You're probably gonna laugh at me.
Of course I'm gonna laugh at
you. Yeah. I remember hearing the sound of the downtuned guitars on like Linkin Park records. And like my dad played guitar, But I never heard anything like that come from his guitars, even when he would plug in and play electric. And I'd ask him, how do they get this sound? He's like, I don't know.
Like that sludgy, thick, yet detailed enough to hear.
I thought it was bass. I thought that's what I was hearing. I was like, oh, this must be a bass guitar, because when I play the slowest note on my dad's guitar, it's not even close. It's not even close to that. I didn't know you could tune the guitar down. I thought guitars were just tuned to whatever standard tuning was. I didn't even know what that was at the time. And I didn't know.
So
I had just
what got you to that
idea.
tone? Was step one, was it just down tuning? Was that step one of it? And then was it effects after that? Or like, how'd you get there?
It took me forever. I kind of got sidetracked. So at that point I wasn't even really playing. We were forming a band, quote unquote, of friends, right? And we're like, you're gonna be the drummer, you're gonna be the whatever, you're gonna be the whatever. And so, but I was like, at some point I was gonna be a bassist, and then I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea what a bass guitar was even supposed to sound like. I just knew that bands had a bass guitar.
Yeah.
You know, and then I was going to be a drummer. So I was a really, really terrible drummer for a while, and eventually somehow started playing acoustic guitar. My earliest memory of like having it click was playing, Smells Like Teen Spirit on my beanbag and learning that by myself with no help. And I was like, oh, maybe I can actually do it. And I was showing my parents, look, I learned this song. And they're like, cool.
That's awesome.
So it was a long way. When I discovered Drop D, like 3 years later, then that's when I was starting like, oh wait, maybe Linkin Park was doing, they were probably taking this further, not realizing how much further they were taking, and Slipknot and all of those kind of bands from that era. That's when I discovered like Drop D and Drop C. Then I started to figure out, oh, there's a lot more range to this instrument than I had previously realized.
Yeah, you can get out of the box with all of it.
Definitely. Well, hey, we're getting close to the end, and I actually have some questions for you from the Tone Mob Facebook group.
Ooh.
I told them, the post I made was because I talk about pizza on every episode, but I said the metamorphosis is complete. I'm interviewing Scott Wiener from Scott's Pizza Tours about guitar stuff and pizza. Got questions? And so some people did indeed have questions. Let's see how many of these are goofy and how many of them are actual questions. Let's dive in here. Okay, Jake Young. Jake Young wants to know, what are some of the strangest ingredients that you've had, I assume, that were shockingly good?
Great question. So I have a lot of experience with this because I had a show with Thrillist called Really Dough, where every episode was at a different pizzeria. We'd order the weirdest thing and then debate whether or not it was actually a pizza. And I also judge at pizza competitions that have no rules. So you can do anything you want. It's called the non-traditional category. So I've eaten a lot of bonkers pizza. And I'll tell you, some of the best pizza I've had that you thought was going to be messed up and terrible. I had one with bacon, jalapeno, normal stuff, no problem. But apple and peanut butter. That was a combo.
I can make those pencil in my brain.
It worked
weird.
Great with the peanut butter. I was shocked. I've had pizza with little gelatin encased balsamic vinegar beads.
What?
So when you take a bite, it like kind of bursts a little bit. That was crazy.
I can also make that work in my brain. I love balsamic vinegar.
Yeah, so. And there's little droplets, like you can hold them in your hand and then pop them and then balsamic. That was crazy. I had mangoes work on pizza, and lime juice is a great combo.
Mangoes?
Yeah.
Mangoes, really?
Yeah.
Huh,
but
okay.
Wait,
all right.
Forget about pizza being sauce and cheese. Pizza is dough that's weighed down during the bake. That's it. So, don't worry about tomato sauce. A white pizza with mango, cilantro, pickled red onions. I mean, come on. It's so good.
Oh, that's getting out there. I mean, I'll try it. I'll try just about anything.
I'm telling you, this is a good question because there are some really good pizzas out there that you would think are terrible. But they're good.
All right, let's see. Carl Platz. Place that has surprisingly good pizza? I'm assuming that means like you look at it and you're like, I don't know about this place. And then you go in and it's legit or just really good. Or better than it has any reason to be. I kind of added some questions there to his question, but I think that's what he means.
I've found that pizza very often looks really good but doesn't taste good, and it's less often that it looks bad but tastes good. But I do think that there's some deep dish pizza that looks so aggressive and looks like it's going to be too much, and then I'll eat it and I'll be like, wow, this is actually totally legit and totally good.
Okay.
Pequod's in Chicago, I think, is a great pizza that looks like it's going to be a disaster.
Yes, it does. But I would try it.
Yeah, and it's great. And I also think the New Haven places, they all look burnt. But when you eat them, it's perfect.
Yeah. I can see that. It's not quite a New Haven style, but the one I mentioned, Mi Familia here, the people around here were not accustomed to that. And that was sometimes the complaint. They would come out and they're like, it looks burnt. I'm like, but you need to bite into it and decide whether it actually is burnt. It's charred. Is it burnt, though?
Can you imagine living
That's
your
a good
life
question.
only eating boiled chicken? You got to have grilled, barbecued, smoked chicken. Like, come on.
I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. That's terrible.
There are some dishes that boiled chicken was great, but I not for my whole life.
Agreed. Not for every meal. All right, let's see. What else we got in here? Now we're going to ask that later. That's not really a question. I don't know if you're going to want to answer this one, and feel free not to answer this one, because we are in a public space, and this is a little bit of a pointed question. Ryan Burke of the From the 60 Cycle Hum podcast and YouTube channel, he wants to know, what's the worst pizza you've ever had?
I can say this definitely without naming names, but
okay,
I remember it was in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. And
in Brooklyn?
Yeah.
This is already shocking me.
And it's the only pizza that I've ever not swallowed. And yeah, the crust was the texture of a used kitchen sponge that's been used like 3 months too long and left out to dry. This like tough, like it's not food. The sauce was sinuous and acidic.
Oh.
And yeah, I'm going to use a word, putrid. It was a putrid sauce. Oh. And then the cheese was, people joke about rubbery cheese all the time, but this was legit rubbery. Like my body can handle a lot of foods. I didn't think my body was going to handle that cheese. I never will forget it because I went into the place, somebody emailed me and they said, oh, I saw an article about you, and if you're such an expert, you got to know about this place. So I went and got the slice, brought it out to my car because I didn't want to eat it in front of the people who worked there. And I sat in there, took a bite, and I remember like opening the car door and just kind of spitting it into the gutter. I felt so terrible. Oh. The place is not there anymore.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So that the place I was talking about was also in St. John's, but it was the only place that would deliver to my old work, and we were not really allowed to leave that place once we got there because of like it's like not national, but like public safety stuff dealing with chemicals. And whatever. You had to be there, and it makes sense. It sounds worse than they locked the doors. They wouldn't let us leave. Yeah. No, it was like. It makes sense. Somebody has to be there at all times. So we would have delivery occasionally, and it was the only place that would deliver at the time to us. And at first I would eat it, but similarly, like the crust was it wasn't what you were describing, but it was so dense in a bad way. Just so dense that I'd bite it and I'm like, am I just eating like the world's thickest, most it's dense is the best way I can describe it, but it was also just bland. Bland and kind of dry, just really, really terrible. I got to a point where when that would get ordered, I would just take this pieces and just shave all the toppings off, throw the crust in the garbage, and just eat the eat the pepperoni and sausage and cheese off of it. And even then, like the sauce was kind of like, ugh. I was like, I'd rather just eat my sandwich, to be honest. I'm good.
Yeah, you can bring your own lunch, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I did most of the time, but still, like you'd have a bunch of people in and, all right, we're ordering pizza. And I was like, oh, you're setting a bad example for what Portland pizza tastes like. This is terrible. But that place similarly is no longer there.
And you survived to tell the tale.
I did. All right, let's see what we have here. Some of these all kind of revolve around the same question of like, you know, some people want to explore the whole topic of pineapple, and I feel like that is an entire podcast episode in and of itself, which could get just go down so many roads. A lot of people want to know what your favorite place is, and I think that's like asking what your favorite child is. That's going to be tough. But I think maybe a good way to frame it is, you know for a fact this is the last slice you're ever going to eat for some reason. Whatever that is. Maybe you develop a gluten intolerance, or maybe it is your last moments on Earth. What is the last slice you would ever pick right now? Wow. And I realize that may change within 45 minutes.
Well, right when you
just in this very moment,
right when you said, "Oh, if you have a gluten intolerance," my brain went in a completely opposite direction from what it did when you asked me my last slice on Earth. Okay, if you're telling me right now I have a gluten intolerance, the last pizza that I'm going to eat is going to be like a Papa John's pizza, because it will make me hate pizza, and that's the best way to continue my existence.
Wow. That is a different way to think about it.
I don't want to spend the rest of my life being like, I can't eat this food. Oh, the last one I ate was so beautiful. No, I want to be like, screw you, pizza. If this is how bad you could be, I don't want you anymore. So that's,
you know, I've never had Papa John's. I've never had it.
Good on you. It's pretty bad.
Kind of weird to say.
Pretty bad.
Okay. Good to know.
But I don't have a good answer for like my favorite, like last slice on Earth, favorite slice, just because it really does change. And I respect that you said you could, is just at this moment. And I will say at this moment, the last pizza that's been sticking in my brain was Zupardi's in West Haven, the sausage pizza.
I saw you posting about that.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I had it a bunch of times. I went there on Friday with my tour guides, and it was as good as ever.
All right. There we go. And in 20 minutes, it'll be something else. That's fair, probably. I think. So we've kind of did a reversal of what I would normally do. Usually that question would be like the last question I ask people before we sign off. But obviously, this is a special circumstance. So we'll do it a little bit backwards. But right now, what I want to do is let you take the floor. You know, if you got something you want to say to a few thousand people and you want a message you want to get out, whether that's a shout out to your grandma or a plug, or just something that's been on your mind, now is a chance to do so.
Well, I'm definitely going to shout out my grandmas, because now that you said that, if I didn't do it, I'd be a real jerk. Grandma Shirley Charlotte had her 103rd birthday last week.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Grandma Seal, shout out to you too. She's like a young grandma though. She'll be 97 in a few months. Young.
Spry.
Yeah, yes. Spry. But another message that I'll send out to everybody is just in the world of pizza, have as much respect for the unfamiliar pizzeria as you would to the unfamiliar sound in your guitar playing or music or whatever. Like remember that as you get closer, you'll see more detail, and you might like that detail, or it might just make you more interested in learning more.
There you go. I like that. That's beautiful. Beautiful. All right. This is the final question now, since we kind of already talked about the favorite pizza or last pizza question.
Wait, do you always ask people what's their last pizza?
At the end of the, I usually ask what their favorite is, because most people are not as experienced as yourself, and so they can usually pick one a little bit easier, or one or two a little bit easier. Sometimes people want to go like, here's my kind of greasy late night, like I don't know what, like kind of slumming it pizza. Sure. And then there's like a highbrow version that they'll pick sometimes. So there's a lot of times people will bounce between the two.
That's so funny, because I don't know if this is the same in the guitar world, but I wonder if that's similar to saying like your favorite like pedal is like a Boss orange distortion pedal or something.
Well, that is hilarious that you say that, because the final question, usually I ask two last questions. One of them is, what is your favorite pizza? And the other question is, what is your favorite Boss pedal?
No way, really?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Every time.
It's the DM2.
Well, I mean, of course.
I
love the DM2. It's so good.
The Boss DM2, I don't remember where we were, but it was when I was with this band touring, and I think we were somewhere in Vermont or something. And I remember somebody had wanted to get rid of their DM2, and I didn't know anything about it because I know especially at that time, I knew very little about effects. I had a Rat and a tuner, and I guess, I don't know. That was pretty much all I used. And I bought it from them for $15. And I've used it on everything I've ever made, music-wise. I love the DM2.
The DM2 is wonderful. That is a great, great choice. Yeah, I do love Boss pedals. So, I mean, shout out Jason. Actually, you know what? I'm not sure if this is 100% accurate. It may be. Jason Fuzzmonger, he's a moderator in the Tone Mob Facebook group, and he's a fellow New York citizen, though I believe he lives upstate. I think he's the first person who told me about you.
No way.
I believe he took your tour. He found Best Pizza, which is, of course, iconic. I've got to go there. And I believe he is the first person to tell me about your tour and its existence because he took it. So that's awesome. Here we are. Yeah, shout out Jason. He's a longtime supporter.
What are common answers to that Boss pedal question?
The tuner is the most common one. The TU2.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I think somebody is actually compiling a list of all of the answers to that question. I started asking that, I think, around episode 150 or so.
Wow.
And so somebody right now, a listener, is compiling the answers to all of those questions to find out what the most popular answer. The CE2 also is very popular. Yep. Some people say DS1. I love a DS1. It's kind of underrated, honestly.
I feel like
most
if
people
you're
just set the tone control too high.
It's so easy to make it sound thin, but I think if you're the better player you are, the better that pedal is.
I mean, even just like thinking about it a little bit differently. It's like we're so used to like putting the tone, around 1 o'clock on most pedals these days, and really that needs to be more like 11 or maybe even further back on the dial to really work. I don't know why they made the range that way. It's got way too much treble in it for most applications.
That's the beauty of getting to know the pedal. It's like getting to know a flour product that like you're going to make your dough and you're like, well, this flour likes a lot more water, so you got to be ready for that. And in the right application, it's good. But it's with tone on that pedal. I hated that pedal for a long time because I just thought it sounded so thin. And then I forgot that like 12 o'clock is not average. 12 o'clock is whatever they wanted 12 to be. 10 is whatever you want 10 to be. And 11 is not just one louder.
Why don't you just take 10 and make that the loudest?
Exactly. the cognitive dissonance in that shot where you're just like, but anyway, it's your listeners have heard enough Spinal Tap references. I don't want to be in the doghouse here.
You can always have one more. It's always,
I think
it's always good.
But one more. But this one's one more.
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited to see what we get into on the Patreon section because I've got a really weird question that I ask over there.
I'm very
quite
excited
often,
about
and I'm excited to see what your answer is. Yeah. Well, all right, everyone. For Scott, this is Blake, and as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All right, there you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. We, of course, got extra weird on the Patreon episode. So if you like weird and you want to help keep this show going, please, please, please check out Patreon. Go to patreon.com/tonemob, and for $5 a month, you can get extra episodes beamed right to your ears every week. And I really, really appreciate everyone that is supporting over there. It is a massive help. Thank you all so much. And something I probably should have plugged at the beginning, but hey, better now than never. If you want to check out the Tone Mob YouTube channel, I am posting a new video today as this episode airs, featuring a brand new Stringjoy product. So we came out with stainless steel bass strings. That's something that we've been asked to do for a very long time. And we now have stainless steel bass strings, which are a great option for those who happen to have a nickel allergy, or somebody who's just looking to get that brighter, more percussive bass attack. It's really great for metal players, but really it's awesome for anybody looking for extra brightness and attack in their bass tone. I do a shootout, not really a shootout, a side-by-side with the signatures and what we are calling the Rangers. That's our new stainless steel bass strings. I'm publishing that today. I am really going to be going hard on YouTube. I know I've threatened that for a really long time, but I'm finally getting more comfortable with my cameras and whatnot. In fact, I think you'll see a big step up in quality on this versus what I've done in the past. So please slide over and check that out. Let me know what you think. If you have any hints for me, any pointers, feel free to email me. If you need me for any reason, get in touch. I am around. I am always around and available. So please hit me up wherever you would normally hit me up on the socials. And I will talk to you on the internet very soon, people. Have a good one. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.
Hey, what's up? My name's Lurk, and I'm the host of Lamb Goat's Van Flip podcast. Every week, I have in-depth conversations with bands from all over the scene, big and small. We also like to keep our finger on the pulse and showcase up-and-coming bands on the show as well. So come check out Lamb Goat's Van Flip podcast.
What's up, everyone? This is Jay Reason, and I want to let you all know that Diablo Zen Podcast is now part of the Sound Talent Media family. Listen in as me and the one and only Danny Diablo, a.k.a. Lord Ezak, interview artists from the hardcore, punk, metal, hip-hop scenes and beyond. We have conversations with guests like actor Peter Green, DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill, LA street photographer Estevan Oriol, Jimmy G from New York City's legendary Murphy's Law, and pro wrestler Vampiro, to name a few. If you're a fan of good discussions and lots of laughs, tune in and join the fun.